Oh, look, there we are.
All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Port of Olympia Commission work session. It's Monday, October 21st, 2024, and it's 3:32 p.m. So this meeting is officially called to order. And we have an agenda in front of us this afternoon. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
Approve today's agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve today's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving today's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. So it looks like the first topic on our agenda here is introduction of new Port of Olympia Harbor Senior Manager, Damian Egan.
Good afternoon, board members.
Good
My name is Damian Egan. Previously was the maintenance supervisor for the Swantown Marina. Been with the port for about 3.5-ish years. Grew up in Olympia, graduate from Capital High School. This is home to me, so I look forward to working with all of you and happy to answer any questions if you have.
Any questions for Damian?
Welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, well, welcome. Next time maybe song and dance.
I'll just make the comment that I've only been here for about 3 years, but Damian has been a consistent voice of positivity and we're so lucky. I love that we're promoting from within. So it's awesome. Congratulations. Well deserved.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
And we will set up time for him, town hall for him with marine attendants so that they all get a chance to get to know him even better and just know who to pick up the phone and call when they've got concerns.
Welcome and thanks, Damian.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Parthia installation. Familiar name, Bill McGregor, South Sound Maritime Heritage Association.
So do you want us to sit there? So
Welcome, anyone who wants.
stairs on front and center.
Ah.
Well, thank you. First, let me say it was nice to meet Damian because I work at the yacht club and then go over and pick his brain when I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not very good with these things, so she wanted.
Oh.
That's good. Yeah. I'll either blind somebody or something. Anyway, good afternoon, Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to sit down and talk with you a little bit about a project we've been working on. And first, I want to introduce Chuck Fowler, who is our legend as far as the Parthia goes. And Senator Karen Frazier, who is also a legend, has been on our South Sound Heritage Maritime Board for
All time.
a long time. And then Carla Fowler, who is Chuck's right-hand person and has been involved with it for a long time as well. So we're here today just to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to lease a piece of land over there by the marble. We're going to be putting the Parthia on here soon, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We just have given you all kind of an update maybe several months ago now, and I think you all got a copy of Chuck's book. And I certainly don't want to dominate the conversation, so just let me say thank you for the opportunity to be here. And we are getting close, I tell you that. As you can see, that is the concept of where it's going to go, right across from Mercado's there and that little funny little corner that is basically covered with gravel and a couple of benches and that type of thing on the entrance to the market. And we're excited about it because we've gotten some Department of Commerce grants that have helped us along, as well as donations from many of the some of the many leaders in our community, and we're ready to move and start turning dirt. And we're hoping to do that hopefully November 4th. So we want to make sure you keep your calendar clear for that. We'll try to do it in between rain bursts, atmospheric rivers, and everything else that goes with it. And
Could you say that again? Sorry, what day?
November 4th.
November 4th.
Probably 10 o'clock is what we're gonna aim for. anyway, we are moving forward. We've got a contractor form of construction is working it. And we've got the permits secured. We'll be working with the city just to keep them informed of the progress we're going, and so it's an exciting time to actually see something happening. So well, hopefully you can all be at the Golden Shovel event, and you're turning dirt and not water this time of year. Anyway, Chuck, anything you would like to talk about?
Well, I think we met with the new commissioners separately, and we gave you copies of the book. This is Exploring Maritime Washington, a History and Guide. But our project, which is, we are calling it the Tugboat Heritage Walk, and it is a larger project than just the Parthia. The Parthia was rescued in 2019. 2016, and when the 20-year effort to create the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area under the National Park Service came about in 2019, had to be approved by Congress. We had already included the Tugboat Heritage Walk, which is the attraction for Olympia that connects Parthia, the location that Bill just described across from Mercado, it was going to be the Sandman in the water at the Oyster House. If you notice, Sandman is not at its normal moorage at the Olympia Oyster House because it needed some repair. So it's hauled out in Swantown. And but it is part of the Two Tug Heritage Walk. Concept is Parthia at the north end of the walk, and then interpretive signage to enhance the interpretive signage that is there now, leading to the walk south or north, as the case may be, that connects Parthia with Sandman. Both Parthia and Sandman were once part of the Delta B. Smith Tug and Barge Company. Delta B. Smith was a port commissioner, and that company was well known. So both Sandman and Parthia were once part of that fleet. And that location was right where the Bay Cafe is today. You've been in the Bud Bay Cafe recently. You've seen, as you walk down the hall, you see the Parthia story, because the owners of the Bud Bay Cafe, Danielle and Pam, were nice enough to include our interpretation and photos and text telling about the history of that location in the remodel of the Bud Bay Cafe. Found out they were going to remodel, and you may remember the goldfish swimming through the fir forest that there used to be there on the big wall. And I just said to Danielle, you know, we could create an authentic heritage location for you instead of goldfish swimming through the fir trees. Oh, how do we do that? Well, you could cooperate with the South Sound Maritime Heritage Association, because we have all the history, all the photos, as well as the new photos about the project. She and Pam said, sounds great to us. So we'll pay for you having the photos made and all of that if you will do the work together, the interpretive text and all that. So it's been a great partnership, and I think being involved in the heritage business for a long time, that it's the first opportunity for a private sector firm to come together with a nonprofit organization to create what is basically kind of a mini maritime museum. So it's a real breakthrough project on that end as well. So we've had the partnership also between Ron Thomas, who designed this pavilion, and the location. The Parthia will be a what they call a dry berth exhibit. It'll be in a cradle, and then there'll be interpretive signage around again saying what it is. Because of insurance liability, which would be outrageously expensive, people will not be able to go aboard, but we'll have photos of what it looks like inside and all of that inside. So Ron Thomas, he had designed the pavilion and all of that at no cost to us as a pro bono assignment. And Drew Phillips of Forma Construction has provided his retired carpenters to put it all together and all of that. And the South Sound Maritime Association has gone out and we've raised a considerable amount of money. Our legislative delegation got $140,000 grant from the legislature as part of this project. Altogether, it's about a $250,000 effort. And as Bill said, we have some significant contributions from the community, and we're continuing that effort. So I have strong armed some of my best friends to get involved in this project. And by the way, we are hoping for your pro bono involvement. And Janice Stevenson, who many of you know is the county and city, basically our historian, has agreed to do the text and write the story about what you're seeing as you walk down the Boat Heritage Walk and look at some of the existing porcelain signage that's on the Harbor House and all. And then we'll supplement with signage about this project. So we're very pleased that we'll turn some dirt on the 4th and get the project underway. So any questions? I'm glad to answer.
Karen?
Well, okay, Karen Fraser, member of the board of the South Sound Maritime Heritage Association. I'm an old sailor and that's why I'm so interested in all this. Also, I think appreciating history is really important for a community, kind of ties the past, the present, and the future together. So I think this is a great project and it'll be in a very nice spot. Thank you again to the port for making this very boring gravel spot a very wonderful exhibit that I think the community will really appreciate. So, and the Parthia was one of the mosquito fleet, the famous mosquito fleet ran around long before Harvard. Thank you for having this on your agenda today.
So the only other slide I wanted to bring up with you, I guess, is that both the Parthia has been listed on the Washington Heritage Register of Historic Places, as well as on the National Register of Historic Places. So it's a pretty important piece of artifact for our community and example of our history. So we're excited to see it happen. And I do want to make comment that the Sandman is not at this point part of our foundation. We're trying to work with them to see what we can do to collaborate with them a little bit so that we can save the Sandman from destruction and the elements. So we're working with them. That'll be something that'll come along at a future time. So, but anyway, we just appreciate it. We just want to bring you up to date so that when you see maybe a fence going up around there and you see people with shovels and moving stuff, it's moving forward, and we're excited to get this going and get it completed. So thank you for your time, and we're here to answer any questions. Carla, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Did you want to say anything? You're fine.
Well, the only thing I might add is Parthia worked this waterfront for 40 years. So she is a very significant part of history, and this will be a great opportunity to recognize that.
I think we've provided copies of the book for you, but if any of you haven't received copies, I have copies here if you want.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here. It's not often we get a group of legends to come in and share it with us. So we certainly appreciate Yeah, we're certainly appreciative also of being a part of the destination of the Parthia. That's absolutely great. So you had a question, Commissioner Savana?
Comment question?
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to also thank you and congratulate you on how you've been able to recruit resources to bring this like piece of our history forward into our present. And I assume you're going to keep moving forward with your organization. I want to make a plug that we are launching master planning efforts for the Port Peninsula that include many of the parcels, especially kind of east and north of where the Parthia will be located. And when you start talking about the vision of a heritage walk, the Tug Heritage Walk, it seems like that could integrate into sort of some of the, well, at least what I hope we're going to be planning, which is sort of a string of cultural and recreational amenities that connect east to west in Olympia. So my plug is to leverage your legendary stature or your ability to strong arm people, which you mentioned, not me, to encourage the people who share this passion to participate in the master planning process, help get it in front of our team of consultants and part of the transparent public process so we can build this kind of amenity forward in downtown Olympia.
Thank you. Very good comment.
And I would just piggyback on that. If there potentially are grant opportunities or anything based on this maritime heritage designation at the national parks level, or just things we don't know about, love to learn more, I think. Cause I think our community in general is getting socialized with that. That's not something people are super familiar with yet, so.
Yeah, we have the management agency for the National Park Service funds that have been approved. Is the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation. We got our foot in the door about 2 years ago and we went to them and asked them for a planning grant for the interpretive signage. Interpretive signage was done by Windsor Fire Forum. He did all the original interpretive porcelain signage you see on the buildings and in the kiosks at the landing. So we dealt with John Windsor, who founded the firm way back at the time, but went back to Brian, who was the president of Windsor Fire Forum, and they're originally from California. And we did the same thing with them. Oh, you're kind of new to the community. Have you heard about, you could get your foot in the door and build good relationships if you would do this. So strong arming that we.
He's
But
very
anyway.
good at it.
But we have a $3,000 grant from Washington Trust for Historic Preservation to do that, some of that funding. And then we'll be doing the same thing in our meetings with Brian. Shanna Stevenson will be writing the interpretation. And so we'll be meeting with Brian and with them to start that whole process. So it's really exciting to break ground for a big part of this, and then to continue the project become a reality. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff, we try to, make as long a presentation as we can. So we tried to help you out.
Paul.
Anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll be back and you'll probably be getting some kind of an invite here shortly for the November 4th. I'm breaking.
Outstanding.
So thank you. Thank you.
Anybody need? Great.
All right.
I'll take one to my kid's school if you want to give me another.
You probably ought to
There you go.
All right. Well, that's a tough act to follow. Ted, if you're up for the task.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I will start off, Commissioners, Tad Koff, Director of Finance, Port of Olympia.
Let me introduce the agenda item here so everybody knows what we're about to talk about. So this agenda item is the 2025 budget and capital investment plan with the draft operation budget, and this is our first review. So, okay, so Ted, take it away.
Okay. Ted Koff, Director of Finance, Port of Olympia. Start off by apologizing for the very tardiness of getting materials out. This week, we were working really right up until very close before this meeting to get this fine tuned and get it as meaningful as possible presentation. There are a couple different slides from the previous year or two. We're taking some parts from other ports and trying to integrate and become more transparent and meaningful. Tricia is here and she will be talking to a couple parts that she's brought from the port into us.
And is it fair to say there's a couple of things in this presentation that differ from what we provided to you on Friday after
Yes.
we went back and did some graph keeping? So Tad will highlight.
So we've got a couple of updates as well, even from Friday. We will get them. So
Point of order then, have we been clear in when we repost this online of what changes were made? Because sometimes I know it's not deliberate, but making
Yeah.
really clear that that's transparent.
we'll have clearly two different versions of what changed. So that being said, today's meeting is like as well. It's no action required. This is as we said before, the first go through of the comprehensive draft operating budget. Kind of all the components brought together here today. And we will be looking at making changes and updating this as we go into the next week as well. So today's agenda, we're going to go through the IOUs quickly. There aren't any new ones, so we'll just go through that. I won't run through them. Go through the schedule with assumptions, CIPs, overview, operating budget, and then we'll touch on the tax levy again. I do have an update to that as well. Prior IOU that changed. These were the ones from the meeting before last. We're here for reference. And then we have no new IOUs from the last meeting. The discussion of everything while we were together. Budget timeline for the next meetings coming in October 28th will be the second review of basically the material after we honed it in and gotten it to the place where we want it. November 12th will then be the budget and capital investment plan review, and we will then go into, if necessary, another meeting optional on 18th with the final adoption text with the resolutions that we'll need to adopt on the November 25th meeting. On to budget assumptions. So these are the high level takeaways, kind of the first foray into what we're going to be discussing. We've got starting out high level operating revenues going from the adopted budget of 2024 to the proposed budget of 2025. It's important to keep those numbers that's what we're comparing here in mind. That we've got an operating revenues increase projected of 6.4%. An operating and maintenance expense tentatively projected at 3.2%. These numbers are likely to change a bit as we go through, look at these numbers. So this is a first brush. Grants that we had from 2024 were 4.6 million, and we are anticipating 9.5 million in 2025. A large jump in grant money there. Largely, again, that's going to be going with our environmental policy that we're going after this year. Rates and fees, airport is expected to go up on an average 5%. Marina in lockstep at a 5% increase across the board. And the marine terminal tariff rate is expected to be 3.6%. Staffing, this is a placeholder at this point, a COLA salary adjustment of 3%. I understand that that's likely to do a little up a little bit. And then we have 3 additional FTE positions expected. We've got an airport manager, an IT manager and an environmental specialist that'll be projected to be added in. Questions? I have this on one slide. I split it into two last year, but it got a little bit more condensed. This is the proposed capital budget. We've seen this. James was kind enough to bring this on last presentation. We are landing right now at a proposed port total exposure of just under 3.4 million. I think it's I printed out the small version here, so I'll have to split 3.385 million total. With the largest, I think, takeaways there will be the runway 1315 at $225,000. We've got some stormwater and boat works yard expansion proposals, and the largest one is the storage facility for 3 million on the terminal. Then we have some other ones as well with a GI building proposal of the 1.75 million as well. I believe our executive director might want to comment on any of those, or?
Well, just the storage facility is the warehouse, and that is we've been looking at a total of 4 million and looking at a budget amendment at the next commission meeting. And I mean, I think overall, I just wanted to highlight that this is a lot more that we're putting into capital investment than we did last year. So it's significantly more, but we're at a point where these projects need to happen. We need to be maintaining assets. But we are trying to maximize the grant revenue that we get to help facilitate these projects. So, yeah, I think that's it.
And just for historical context, there was some conversation at previous meetings about how there was maintenance or capital improvements that were being deferred, so our reserve was growing. So that is in keeping with some of the conversations we had previously, that there were expenditures that the chicken was gonna come home to roost or whatever the.
Yeah, it's caught up.
Yeah, it's caught up with us, and that was expected, I think, by some people that were watching us.
Yeah, and I think we will have continued catching up with us in future years as well. And so I think that's why we're very focused on revenue generation as we move into the next few years.
Also, the marine terminal specifically, it's been like years since we've done any sort of capital expenditure, correct? Like aside from paving or things that were.
Yes.
And then one of the things Commissioner Basavada had brought up before was just delineating that the airport funds are the airport funds. So it's fair to assume that the ports funds under airport are fenced airport funds that are specifically from the airport. Correct?
You mean generated by the airport itself?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've been talking about, is just recognizing it's an accounting bucket as much as anything else, but communicating with the public that these are funds that are generated by the airport and its supporting properties. So they're not coming from revenues generated at the marine terminal. And having a way of tracking and communicating that so that it's more clear.
We're gonna take a look at that as we get to the airport and the marine terminal. Sorry, the airport and the new market. That they are definitely tracked separately. We're gonna know what the costs are. If the costs do come out of the general funds, then it would be an indebtedness from the airport that is owed to the port proper from the airport.
So, so these are, whether it's loan money or not, the monies that are being spent on the airport are generated by the airport. If there may be a loan happening that will need to be repaid, which is no different than another loan, but we can clearly communicate with the public that the money is being invested, the port funds, now or later, are coming from the airport and its supporting properties.
This is something we've raised many, many times. And so I think the question for you is, have the relevant accounting mechanisms been put in place and sort of legal transactional documentation so that we can start making a case that each business line is self-supporting. That
And
we're
specifically the
reinvesting
airport.
in the business lines and the airport in specific. So I think it's, before I approve a budget, I would like to feel more confidence that this is being tracked and have an update on that.
And I think, you know, we've talked a lot internally about that desire. I think though, we're not currently, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, we're not currently set up to really have it be as each business unit has its own business line and the port is sort of the mothership yet. We can do it, but it'll take some doing to set up our accounting system that way. But we still can for the airport specifically because it is that unique beast. Make sure that we're tracking that is in this budget and as we head into the 2025 budget.
And I think the priority of the commission was the airport. Not that every business line, because I think that we are gonna be having some philosophical discussions about maybe one business line does support another business line and that's okay, but because of the way that we've been given property by the FAA and different things like that, communicating that cycle of reinvestment would be a priority.
Yeah, we'll make sure we track it that way and communicate it that way.
Thank you.
And since we stopped on this slide, may I have one opportunity? I think that the bigger investments here, I would really like to see paper on. In other words, I'd like to see a memo that kind of thought through, that explains the rationale, why it's needed, what alternatives were considered, what's the opportunity cost. So for me, I would characterize that as the port funds greater than 500,000, which I see 3 projects. I don't know if others have a different take, but I really need to see more on number 16, number 19, and number 22.
So
In addition, sorry,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, are you wanting more than the white papers or are you?
Well, yes, and I can follow up with staff about what's missing from the
Yeah.
white paper.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the capital items? So, what we show here is the cash statutory budget, which is really the first. This is what you are technically adopting when you vote and get the budget. This is just the very front of what you'll see if you go log on to the state where we submit our budget. You'll see the cash statutory budget very close to the very beginning. So we have, now there are some assumptions and estimates in here with the beginning cash and investment balance. The beginning of 2025 is the end of 2024. So that is a projection of the 31 million. We end up with the operating revenues coming in at 16.6 million for 2025, operating expense at 15 million. And we flow through it through here. That's not a comparative analysis. So we end up with the projected end of cash and investments for the $23 million. Are there any questions on that? And this is not granular at all, so there's not a lot of makes it. So to speak.
You mentioned the grant revenue. Obviously, that's I don't know if it's quite doubling, but, are we confident those funds obviously make a big difference in the balancing of the budget? Are those pretty gimmies or I guess, could you just say a little bit more about why you feel comfortable having that as a budget?
Sure. So if you look back, if I go back one slide here to the capital budget, one of the large, you'll see the large chunk of it detailed in here on the grant funds for the capital budgets. So those are in there as well, in addition to environmental. So the grant funding is $6.26 million. And that's one of the major flows that are in here as well, because there's a lot of grant dollars tied to projects, especially let's say the runway specifically, where there is a port funding of 225,000. There's a grant funding of over $4 million going to it.
Rick, I'm running James, especially, I thought we only included grant funds in this chart if we knew we we're getting grant funds, this is yet. So there are other projects on here for which we are currently applying for grant funds, but the only ones that appear in the budget, because the only ones we know for sure we can count on are the ones that have already been approved.
Okay, and so this is, yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. So the 6.2 to the 9.4.
No, that's a $2.3 million environmental grant.
Okay,
So it's not capital, so it doesn't reside on this slide, but
so all the grant revenue has already been, this is not a maybe, this is awarded. Okay, thanks.
And there's additional grant funding we're looking for,
Okay.
so this could. Yeah,
Perfect.
and we're getting-
Thank you.
Any other questions on the cash statutory budget? On. So I'm gonna let Tricia talk about these two slides. They are something you'd seen. There was a placeholder in what we sent out, and these are kind of busy. So we're gonna look for common ground in the future. This is in replacement or replaces a very simplistic cash position slide that we've had in years past. That I don't think really told any story. It didn't give any information. What this will do, and Tricia can walk through it, is you're basically seeing 2024 walked through for the year, and you're gonna see components brought together of the general operations, capital, and debt service. So where you start and how we get to the ending cash number for the year. And then on the following slide, which is the next one, is 2025, which then starts at the end of this year and walks us through to the end of 2025. So you'll actually see the cash number we're projecting to begin 2026. This is maybe a beginning step of some of the concepts that we've talked about of getting a little bit longer projection and view of not just a budget for this year, but at least somewhat informing into future ideas, capital projects that might track over the years. And this is kind of move in that direction. So I'll
so I don't know if everybody knows, but I worked at the Port of Port Angeles prior to working here. And this is a tool that they used. And I really liked it because it's pretty much the only place that you're gonna see different buckets of money that we use all in one place. So we usually look at operating, and then we'll have a different day and look at capital, different day, look at debt. So this takes all of the pieces and puts it on one piece of paper so that you can see the cash effect that it has on the port. Also give you an idea of where the money's coming from, where it's going, and what we have to work with as a port. So, we're on the wrong. So we start with projected 2024, and we start with our original cash balance. And then on the left-hand column, under general operations, we just work through operations, our revenues, subtract out our expenses before depreciation to get a number. And again, we're just looking at the cash impact to the port's operations. So depreciation is not included in here because it's not a cash effect. So once we get through just our regular operations, then we got to pull in our non-operations. And so we just keep on working down through the big buckets of things that happen, big summaries. And if you look under general operations target balance, this is where we start looking at like maybe a 5-year look ahead. So we want to make sure that we have enough money to continue on. So we want to input our next operating year cycle. And then right underneath that the third line there, you'll see cash received from sale of property. That was the sale of the CBC and a Center Point building at the airport, or Center Market.
CBC?
No, CBC was one. We got 9.6 cash from that, and Central Market.
Clean Water had
Clean Water. Fees, I knew there were C's there. Clean Water. So that was a cash influx. And in our normal, the numbers you see, you would never see that 9.6 million because we take it against depreciation and we end up recording it as a gain on sale. So, so there the 9.6 comes in, and then we jump over to the LTGO debt service. That's long-term government obligation debt service. And bring in the property tax that we're expecting, reduce it by the debt service that we have to pay out. And then we also paid for that bond defeasance this year, the 5.2 million. So that reduces our cash impact. And then the very last lines are environmental and capital grants, and then the actual capital spend that we're doing on the capital projects. So if we're real close to the year end, so we're expecting at the year end to have about a $23 million balance that could be used towards operations for the next coming years.
I think this is a cool slide. I like it. Thank you. I mean, to your point, you do see it all in one.
Yeah, and it is a good tool to use for planning in the future, and there is another interrelated piece that hopefully we'll get in that then will give us like a 5-year lookout, and you can see how how they work together to help you try to plan your cash into the future. So then the balances from the previous slide, they become our beginning balances for the new year, like 2025. And it's the exact same calculations. We want to take our operating revenues, move out our expenses, and just work down through the math. When we get down to it, we actually have the our property tax levy is going to increase a little bit this year. And our debt service is about stable now, thanks to the defeasance. So that was a good thing. And again, down at the bottom, we have our environmental and capital grants. And then the money that we will spend that includes the grant portion. So just so the math will work out. And so in this slide though, the 10 million ending balance is actually the effect that we will have, but it includes up there in the general target fund balance. That's the reserve that we calculated earlier this year for IL. And so those two together would make up our cash balance. So yes.
I'm confused about why capital improvements show up in a cash balance. Is it because they're physical assets, but they have just an accounting value?
Well, usually you're right, you won't see them, but this worksheet is taking all of our activities and giving it a cash balance or a cash effect on the port business. So even though what happens, say we're building a wall for $50,000. So when that wall is done, we've paying out the money to the contractors, but we then capitalize it. So it moves into fixed assets and starts to depreciate at the life of that wall. So you only see it at the front end when we're doing our capital budget. So by putting it in here, you get to see how the capital money lives within the budget and how it works with all the other ports resources to help get everything done.
So would it be fair to say that the total cash balance here is a fair indicator of like economic activity of the year, spending of the year plus that's back into the economy plus money that goes into our reserves as potential? It's both pieces.
The spending for the economic value would be the numbers between beginning and ending. The ending balance would be that we've spent, or we end up with this 10 million because we've spent so much for the community to develop the port and its surrounding areas.
This is a big step forward, and it would help to even refine further how we talk about the different ways to measure and why in one case we think what's relevant is the one it is. I'd love your help with that.
And just to be clear, the 10.8 you're saying is a reserve and the 10.4 is cash on hand?
The 12.6 is the reserve.
Points where?
First
Oh,
column,
okay.
middle.
Got it. Got it.
That's a little.
And that was, you said that was something Commissioner Ayal, what did you say? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it was at Kalama.
Yeah.
We discussed how the reserve hadn't been recalculated in a while, and it was running around 4 million, and how that wasn't exactly
Got it.
enough to take care of an emergency situation.
Yeah, the resolution actually has a specific methodology for calculating the reserve, and we had not been doing it according to the resolution. So I all correctly pointed out, we've got a resolution that tells us how to do it.
So the idea being that when we're looking at the balance, we're gonna be breaking it out rather than just looking at it all together.
Right, just so you know that reserve piece is there, and that's the comfort level of,
Got it.
or if something comes up that needs to be tapped into that reserve also.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It's mine.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna work on it, but
Yeah.
when Tricia brought this out and we spent time changing this over to try and make it as useful to our situation as we can. It was just a no-brainer that it was a better picture and it tells the story of how we get from here to there and what's in between. And it is a little busy, it's a little confusing, and it needs this narrative to go through it, but I mean, you work in like that reserve, you can see that, and that 10 million is what is operationally available above the reserve. So it helps add some clarity for future.
I see this one here.
And what James is working on is our projections out of our maintenance and capital improvements that are gonna be necessary. So when we look at the 10 million, we might have that all already spent on maintaining our current assets. Potentially, like,
Not sure we're there yet.
well, no, but he's working on it, right?
He's working on it, absolutely.
What do we call that again? The capital something plan?
Yeah, we're working on a 10-year capital investment plan, but
That.
we're also going to start working separately on the maintenance stuff.
So when future commissioners come in, they can look at these numbers and put them in context of our obligations rather than just seeing, oh, we have $10 million to spend. I think that'll be really helpful.
Agreed. And as we have future year projections, it'll help James know what he's going to have available for
Totally.
more years ahead.
Moving on. This is a slide that you'll have some familiarity with. This is the operating budget for our operating units, broken down individually, but also seeing everything next to each other. So we're looking at obviously the airport, Swantown Marina properties, and then we've got the chunk for general admin, the total for the 2025 budget. We're gonna go through these individually, so with a little bit more detail for each of what went up and what went down. And I believe we've got our individual representatives here for the most part that can speak to questions of the whats and the whys better than I can. And we did that last year and it went pretty well. It was a better way of going through it. So on the whole, you'll see operating income before depreciation. We've gotten positive all the way across. And then you'll see depreciation knocks that down. One of these has changed specifically from the slide deck that you received. You'll see under the marine terminal, we had a couple of miscalculations that put that number very negative, almost $1 million negative after depreciation. And it is 187,000 negative after depreciation. So it was a rather swing to the positive or the better. Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna make a suggestion. We're getting ready to, there's no reason those guys have to sit in the corner.
Yeah, they can come over and they've been bad.
What are you gonna say?
No, I was just, I'm not familiar with this term, contribution margin.
Well, that's a great question.
So the contribution margin is the revenues less operating and maintenance expense. It's not a regular accounting number, so to speak, but it's one that's been historically arrived to the port. As
The
far
amount
as-
of cash that each business line is contributing to the port.
It's useful in terms of just looking at not necessarily seeing a standard I don't know.
Can I ask, because as we start to move towards trying to really understand how our businesses are doing, the issue of how we're allocating our admin expenses across the lines actually becomes a driver. I mean, it's relevant to whether something might be in the red or not. Like, so this is another topic that's come up a lot of times. Like, what are the, and I know it's a little bit in the weeds, but how are we allocating those admin expenses across them?
We are allocating based on expense per department, so total expenses. So if the marine terminal is spending more, they're gonna get more allocation for admin and overhead. And we have a couple slides towards.
Oh, great.
Great.
Yeah, we will get into more detail.
But I was just wondering how the general admin depreciation is calculated, is the 280.
It's not calculated. It is whatever the admin departments have purchased that we have capitalized. So it could be computer equipment, servers, furniture.
It looks like a weird number just kind of hangs. But we don't make any revenues and we don't have a margin to speak, so. It's track it for clarity. It's not lost in the weeds, so. to speak.
Thank you.
Other questions? So we've got, you'll see one of these and basically a graphical representation of the same thing we've just seen. We've got a comparative total port number, and these basically give you a little comparison. We got a 2023 actual, then we've got the 2024 budget projected, and then the 2025 budget. And what we are generally comparing to apples and have as minimum of a moving target as possible is the 2024 budget to the 2025 budget, unless it's otherwise stated. And then we move on to, as we said, we get into a bit of more of a nuance where first up will be the airport. You'll see their operating revenue expense, maintenance expenses, then the airport capital investment plan, which comes over from the capital schedule. The net income before depreciation, which is a positive $545. And then once depreciation is calculated in, they come in at negative 432. Overall operating revenues went up, projected 6.9%. Operating expenses went up by 26.3%, and maintenance expenses went up by 10.6%. And those are representative of a lot of the activities that are going on in some of the maintenance areas that we were talking about earlier as well. And then we just have the graphical representation of the more or less the same thing. You can see it. Chris, do you want to add anything to that, or?
I'm gonna answer any questions. I mean, if you want to go back to the last slide really quick. The operating expenses of 26.3%, that significant rise is due to us getting a spot for an operations manager to fill the role. So that's why that increase is so significant. 10% increase, that's also a fairly large number on the expenses. Again, in addition to the capital projects that we're working on for next year's budget, as was discussed earlier tonight, we have quite a bit of catching up to do on maintenance. So I've allocated a significant amount of money in our maintenance funds to get some liabilities addressed, some areas that really need to be addressed, some concerns. So there's been a lot of crack sealing, seal coating and striping next year on the infrastructure at the airport to mitigate some safety issues out there. We want to make sure to keep
So the operations manager is a new position?
that is a new position. It's a returning position. It was a position that the airport had in the past, probably about a decade or more ago that
Okay.
On, then we go to the marina. Operating revenues of almost just under $5 million is an increase of 4.7%. Expenses relatively flat, as is maintenance. Capital marina investment plan straight off of the capital investment plan as well, with a net income before depreciation of $373,000 and coming in with after depreciation losing $160,000.
Do we have a slide that says how much our administration expenses have increased year to year?
I don't think we've got a comparatively speaking.
Have it in the overall.
We have the overall, but we don't have a comparative.
I guess one of the things that we've talked about is looking at those government functions as a percentage of administration expenses. Do you feel like some of those have gotten moved over to government services? Do you feel like there's more to do there?
I think there may be more to do there. I mean, if you look at slide 13, it actually does show at what administration. Budget, 2025 budget. They've gone up a little bit since 2023. But yeah, we can dial in a little bit more on that and see what more we can work on.
And I've made this comment before, but I'll just make it again. I think that if we're looking at our business operations as businesses and we're layering on the cost of public records requests and things that are affiliated with being a public agency, it's not necessarily a fair understanding of the profitability of business lines. And so I personally think that's a good tax levy, paying for government services to run a public organization. So I would like to just make that comment again, for discussion. And when we're looking at these numbers for all of the business lines, just acknowledging that the administration expenses that we are calculating into this may be a percentage of that might be associated with running a public agency, not necessarily the accounting for the marina. So when the public is looking at these numbers, I don't know that it fully tells the whole story of. Go ahead, no, sorry.
I'm looking at a slide you don't have, but with the change in government services from commission to government services to capture those kind of costs, just to give you an idea, from 2024 budget of $1,010,000. For 2025 budget, it's going to be $1,741,000. So we have shifted a lot of like the public amenities and the governance of those things into government services, and that does not get allocated back into the operating departments.
And this has come up because if I'm running one of the business lines and I have no control over the admin expenses and we're hiring consultants and lawyers and doing things, and it's making me have a net loss in my projections of my business line, that would be frustrating to me. So I would just encourage all of you business line folks to advocate for this conversation as well. And we don't know what we don't know. Like every time we do the budget, we're not doing this in the day-to-day, and we're learning. So please feel free to bring your comments as to how we can improve this process. And then we can make a philosophical decision as to whether we agree or not, but at least we don't even know what the questions are necessarily of how this is being accounted. That's just something that keeps popping up for me, is it's such a large number that seems like a portion of that has to be related to running a government agency.
And I just want to add, I think we do need to set this as its own conversation. And it's not clear it's going to be in cycle with this budget
Right.
adoption, but because I think you need clear guidance from us as a commission of 5 with a vote on some of these things where I think this is one of the rare cases where probably Commissioner Harding and I actually disagree on some of the things. And so we're going to have to see what the guidance of the whole commission is.
But calling the question to the commission, because the way we look at some of this could be drastically different if the commission, depending on what the commission as a whole decided, but we have yet to get to the point with our finances where we are asking the commission to decide. We have, and that's no one's fault here. We've just had turnover in our finance department. So we've been asking the question since Chair Ayala and I began to have some of these questions be answered, and we just haven't done it. So collectively, what questions does the commission need to answer? And it doesn't need to be tomorrow or in keeping with this budget cycle, but it can't be kicked forever down the road.
It has to be before the next budget cycle that we work it out. Yeah. May I go back to slide 14, just the airport manager FTE that's driving the operating costs at the airport. Again, this becomes the kind of thing where once we ring fence the airport, I'm comfortable with sort of letting it management decisions, just not even, looking that deeply into them. But for now, can you just say something about the need for this new, and some people seem to be feeling like maybe the courts are a little top heavy. Can you explain why we need another manager at the airport?
And it would be an operations manager position. They would be over the maintenance crew, but it would be just an allocation of duties. Right now, just as a perfect example today, we have 2 full-time maintenance staff that handle all of the airport inside the fence, as well as Newmarket and Clean Water, and as well as the airport center on the corner. So that's a lot of responsibility for 2 people. And currently that the maintenance supervisor also handles like operating projects such as a hangar, like our WSP hangar, the Washington State Patrol hangar needed some new HVAC units. Well, on top of all his other duties, he's also meeting with the consultants and the contractors to make that work, escorting them on and off the airfield and so forth. And so the reason why I can't do that, for example, we had surveyors out there today that were doing survey work because I'm here. And so those kind of examples happen constantly every week. And so having someone who is in charge of the projects on the airfield, who can also do escorting, who can also train future employees or summer help, things like that, is do some of the work. Does
that mean the Clearwater campus maintenance of those facilities isn't covered within the leases for those facilities?
They pay a fee for those services, and so we handle them through service contracts, such as lawn mowing companies. Some of the work has been done by our own staff.
And are the costs ultimately recovered from the leasing of that land specifically through the costs of leasing those facilities?
Through the there's a fee that's assessed on top of their rent for general maintenance of those facilities.
So will that fee be covering the work of the operating, the managing operations manager that is attributable to that campus?
I would have to get with Clarita and see how and those numbers were calculated and what included in those numbers when they calculated what those maintenance fees would be. But no, the short answer is no, that's not what was intended, because those fees have been assessed on those tenants for years. So this operations position is a brand new position that was not accounted for in those fees.
Okay, thank you.
But just again, going back to what we talked about, there's a reason why there's so much money in the piggy bank right now. We're trying to change course and get on a better path. Unfortunately, that's going to mean having more staff and more project costs than we've been used to for the last decade, at least as the airport. I won't speak for other business units, but when you look at how much money was spent on projects in the last decade at the airport, it's very minimal. And again, I'd be happy to take all of you out on tours of the airfield, the actual airfield, so you can see what we're facing out there. We we have grant obligations to the FAA that we need to make sure that we're complying with. And so there's a lot of work to do.
Before we move on, just a quick question, going back to the budget assumptions not that I mean to pick on the marina, but I was just it just dawned on me that the marina increase in the budget and assumptions or rates and fees were targeting at 5%. So can you maybe explain to me how you calculated that? Is that based on the 2024 budget or the 2024 projected ending?
It'll be budget to budget, so that'll be the rate sheets that were listed and adopted on the 24 budget versus the rate sheets that are the proposed ones for this one. And it's an aggregate average that comes out to be. There are fluctuations in there though.
Well, I just looking at 2024 budget and the increase in revenue to 2025 is only 3.5%. From what I calculated here, so I was just curious where does the 5% come in? And how does that?
I'll have to work the number back against the two to see that there's other things that are income to there other than just straight fees as well.
Yeah.
That would be my assumption.
And that's really what my question is, I guess, is if we're just doing the rates and fees at 5%, there must be something else in there that revenue that we don't have that leverage with.
And historically, when do rates and fees come to the commission for discussion? Like, this is the time, right? So if somebody said, I think there should be a 20% increase, that would be at this table with the budget.
It would. Now, I will say that it has come up by the commissioners before, with resolution. By resolution, there was a line item that comment, are we charging under market rate for any of the fees? And I think that was specifically addressed at the marina. I did talk with Warren, and I don't believe he's online
He actually is, but he is raising his virtual hand.
Oh, yes. He's done research. He knows the answer to that. I don't know how to get him on though.
Yeah. Warren.
I'm on if you can hear me.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, go ahead, Warren. We can hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, commissioners. If I can also to ask, to add on to Chris's comments with regard to the operation position at the airport. The other part of this, of course, is we are anticipating further development under the Habitat Conservation Plan as we continue to negotiate with Fish and Wildlife Service through alternative methods. And the development of the properties at both Newmarket and Cleanwater will also take into account, the additional demands on the airport office as those development processes get underway. In addition, we're actively exploring the possibility under the airport master plan of commercial service. And that's going to dictate another level of effort over and above the typical operations and maintenance requirements that we've met historically to date, or at least over the last several years. And then thirdly, with regard to the Clean Water Center maintenance expenses, what you're talking about there is what's called Consolidated Area Maintenance, CAM. And that is a portion of expenses that are attributed to the tenants as part of their land lease. But not all of the buildings are currently under lease. Our largest building, what we call the 300 Tumwater building, also is the H or the I building, depending upon how you look at it from an aerial point of view, is also still under port control. And therefore, we are 100% responsible for all of those. So those are a few additional pointers there with regard to the airport. With regard to then the marina, on the rate schedules, yes, the rate schedule is an entire appendix to the budget, which is approved as part of the budget process by the commission annually. This is the time of year when all rates and charges are reviewed for the entire calendar year. Now, typically, you will find that other marinas, for example, that are privately owned or for the most part, will go ahead and do their rates and charges on a seasonal basis. So their rates and charges are effective on either April 1st or May 1st for the season. Because our rates and charges are part of the commission approval process, they are approved as part of the budget and therefore are done on a calendar year basis. And so this is our opportunity, both at the airport, the marina, the marine terminal, with the tariffs, rates and charges, to go ahead and do that. What you have seen is we have consolidated our rate schedules to the point that on the marina side, yes, it was a 5% across the board increase, not in all areas. We didn't change things for parking or for kayak parking. Those are very small dollar amounts, but essentially 5% across the board. And we also eliminated the discounts that historically had been at the boatworks. So although it was a 5% increase overall, the fact that we removed some of the discounts that applied for wintertime storage or for the first 7 days of dry haul, out haul on the boatyard, that actually wound up increasing then the overall operating revenue up to 6.9%.
Question for you, Warren, you said we've increased, like we've changed our boat storage rates and stuff. Are you talking about what you're proposing to do in the future budget year?
Yes, that is part of the capital budget. That is part of the appendix, a budget submission to the commission that will be part of the 2025 budget. That is correct.
And so we will in the future, this is our first briefing on the budget. It's assuming that we enact this increase in rates and charges, but we've not yet been given the appendix that explains what we're being asked to enact. Is that right?
I have to defer now to Tad as in terms of if he's provided you that appendix data. Those data and informations were submitted, into finance at exactly at what point in time they get released as part of the first review and the second review. I'll defer to Tad on the timing for that.
We still owe you the background material on that. So you have not seen it. So
I'm a little worried about that because it's something I've been repeatedly asking about, kind of our fee structure. And so if it's gonna come out, what, next week in time for final adoption, I guess?
we got it just, it was short order just before we got this budget out.
Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday.
And today is a work session, so there's not an opportunity for public comment. So will it be released in a time when there's still opportunity for public comment before budget adoption?
So this presentation, I think we'll go over it again on October 28th, so next Monday. And then we can make sure that as part of the packet for that, we include the schedule.
I think that's really important.
Up to for public.
And could Damien or Warren make a comment about why that's the right percentage and why it shouldn't be more or less, or I mean, without having the appendix, but we can generally assume 5%.
So we looked at local studies. We do an annual rate study for Thurston County, Pierce County, Lewis County, basically the whole South Sound. Market wise, we are within that middle area of Thurston County. So we're much lower than Pierce and King, obviously, because bigger metropolitan areas, but keeping with our Thurston County area, we were kind of right in the center. And that seems to be about the budget, the adjustment that they've been doing over the last couple of years. So we were trying to not make it too drastic to start off with. And this being my iteration of this budget and seeing it and just getting started with it, it was a good pass to go through. And it's been pretty consistent over the last few years to stay in that 5% range and looking at what expenses were, so.
And if we said, as a commission, I'm not saying we're going to, just hypothetically, if we said, the marina needs to get more profitable and we really want to increase rents by 15% rates. I'm just making up that number.
We didn't spend last week at.
I think last year they went almost 10% to get more on the market side. So
You're right.
it's something that we need to look at. If that's something that we need to address, then that is something that we need to address. Because if we need to be with market to stay with the rest of the marinas in this area, that's what we have to do.
Okay.
And that is correct. The 2024 budget was a 10% increase. The 2025 proposal is 5%. And that's a combination of exactly what Damien said, plus taking a look at the annual CPI, the increase in cost over this past year, as well as the fact that we now will have to absorb the 47B contract costs in the marina. 12 of the 14 positions in 47B directly are Swantown expenses.
As we start to talk and as we continue to talk about it, I'm sure we'll be able to understand all the factors. I do have discomfort in this coming in the in the posture of an appendix, like at the moment of a budget adoption, instead of a conversation that's kind of at the beginning of building the budget, which is why I kept asking about it. So I please also take a note that these like changes that are changing basic assumptions going into the budget about how we're operating, I would like those to be conversations we have with the public early in the process, not at the end of the process. In this case, philosophically, just as you bring this forward, I think it's important, you mentioned market rates locally. We don't want to undercut other private marinas in the Sound. And at the same time, like, so by setting rates like to outcompete them. And at the same time, we are a public amenity that's looking to serve as many people as we can serve. And so I think all of that with our new marina director, it's pretty important that we build in some time for you to walk us through the philosophy behind your schedule.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more, Commissioner. Most specifically, having just visited the Port of Bellingham, we took a look at exactly what their rates and charges were for the coming year, and our proposed rates are exactly where they were for the 2024 seasonal rates. And so we are right in the market with them. And then, of course, locally, we looked right at Fiddlehead, and we're not undercutting them, but we're certainly within percentage points of the rates that they charge, given the amenities that we provide that other marinas do not.
And if we're now proposing charging more for our overwinter out of water storage, it was raised to me in a meeting last week that can be a much more environmentally sound way to store a boat than more zinc paint. I'm not an expert, you guys are. So I if you can also make sure you share with us your proposed changes to the overwinter. I'm not using the right words.
Winter storage.
The winter storage and certainly the increasing liability, as you can see from the capital budget proposals with regard to the stormwater, the filtration system, for us to be able to maintain the boatyard as one of the 2 or 3 facilities in the entire Puget Sound with its current capabilities, is the environmental costs do reflect then in those rates and charges going forward because the higher environmental piece to that.
But there's also in the capital budget, a revenue generating project, the boatyard expansion. Was that considered in the revenue for 2025?
It not in a direct result in terms of direct revenue, because we weren't sure exactly what point in time we would actually be able to achieve the completion of that. So the earlier in the year that we can achieve that that expansion, then the greater the revenue, and then our revenue will exceed expectations. But we didn't want to bank on that revenue being provided before we knew a date certain on when the additional capacity would be available.
Okay, thank you.
And Damian, this is probably for next year because you're just getting used to the budgeting process, but I think that this current commission would definitely be open to considering creativity. Like it's been proposed to us that we had a certain number of spots for low income people that had a different rate. If there's really high demand for these larger slips, maybe those have a larger increase because demand is higher and they can't take their boat out as easily. So I think this commission would, if I'm reading the tea leaves, be very open to considering your recommendations on how to increase revenues while continuing to be accessible.
Okay, I think we've been at the marine terminal.
Right.
Or I mean, the marina.
Airport. And,
Both options.
yes.
We're in trouble.
We're on to the marine terminal now. So there is a correction here, and this goes through, carries over from that combined slide as well, where the operating revenue and the operating expenses, we did some recalculations, make sure they were correct right up to the before the meeting, and then we've got a projected revenue increase of 20.4%, operating expenses increase of 26.3%, with maintenance expenses decreasing actually by 12.7%. Ultimately, with the marina coming in with a net income before depreciation of 1.294 and a net income after depreciation of just negative in $187,000. And of course, the large marina marine terminal capital investment. Well. I'm gonna leave this slide open for a little bit because I have a feeling there's gonna be some. I could be.
Todd, do you have access to a schedule of when the major previous capital investments have been made in the marine terminal?
We could certainly look it up.
Because I assume this depreciation, even if the marine terminal were to stop operating today, we would still continue to be paying depreciation costs on assets that have been purchased for the terminal.
That would be true.
As well as debt service.
If it exists, yeah, absolutely.
Is there something other than the crane that has been a large capital expenditure that you can, I mean, I know that's before your time, but.
It's before my, the last one I know is, I asked that before too, you remember?
Yeah, I would go through it.
What did we spend? Because, I can't, I think the last ones were rent, purchase cameras, etc.
There's
But
a-
nothing
Not
major.
huge, and the crane, I think, was the biggest one that stands out.
Marina is the big one.
We're actually going through an accounting right
The
now.
log loaders. I don't know which year it was, but they purchased log loaders, they purchased a crane. And that's about it from what I know.
Well, and if it goes back that far, I'm gonna have to take a look and see what was bond supported as well. Or, I don't think that would have been grant supported. But we are going through comprehensively in accounting to look at all assets, to gauge what's being depreciated, where they stand, what we have, and just to gauge as just an overall review of that. And we're still hopefully getting it done maybe this month.
Probably by end of November. And have lists out to the departments and they're working with us to give us serial numbers and, or if something we have on our books doesn't exist, or vice versa, that kind of, a big cleanup.
Not saying that either one of those is the case,
No.
just saying we're making sure we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
And it sounds like a big lift. And what I want to say is, we're being asked to make for the first time then in a decade, probably a significant capital investment in the marine terminal. $3 million in this proposed budget and then possibly a budget amendment coming before us sooner. And so I think that to the extent you could privilege like doing that piece up front, it could be helpful for some tough decisions that are coming before the Port of Olympia.
And it might be helpful to know how much we could potentially save in depreciation if the crane goes sooner than later.
And that was gonna be my point with when the crane goes, then we are no longer paying depreciation.
8,000 a month. That's what the crane depreciates at.
Don't we still have a bond on the crane?
I'm sorry.
We still have a bond on the crane? Correct?
Partial.
One of them was,
I would have to look at that schedule. I don't have that in front of me to make sure that I have that answer right. I mean, it's probably a partial would be an accurate statement.
as we're looking at the budget, again, there's these legacy things that are impacting the way it's occurring today, even as operations continue to change. So I think that's a really important point.
And may I add in? Yeah. And compared to the printouts, there's a change, obviously. So initially, when we put the first numbers, it was August. And since then, our business projection with our paper client has changed. And so I booked more vessel on that one. It for the budget, but we also, this includes a deduction actually in warehouse or number of warehouse vessels. So before we were budgeting for 17 ships, but this year we're gonna make only 15, and I don't see a reason for next year to be any better. So that's 15 vessels of warehouser. That's an all-time low, by the way, for the warehouser operation. So
So you're assuming 15 warehouser in this and how many other?
only 15. I only budgeted for 15 warehouser ships and 4 Suzano vessels. We might have 5 Suzano vessels. And obviously, this is a marine terminal. Every year we do other types of vessels, but I don't want to ghost book them on the budget. So you will probably see an upside surprise, but this is only the things that more or less is coming our way. Back in the day, we did the marine terminal budget based, looks like it was based on more assumptions. Unfortunately, right now, especially with the market conditions right now, where all the ports are going through what I don't want to assume that, oh, we're gonna have an engine project and this is gonna be $150,000 in this line item. So these are only the known ones that we know coming our way. The revenue side.
So to the chair's previous question about a capital investment and what, we have a warehouse investment in the capital projects list, but you're not assuming any
So
increased revenues from that in this budget.
absolutely, I was thinking about that when you asked that question. No, this one doesn't. I'll give a very good example. If we finish the warehouse by say May or June, there could be a possibility that the last two ships, the last two quarters of 2025, they could bring more tonnage, and that would immediately generate revenue. And if they increase the tonnage to the level that they want to, it would be another $150,000 per ship. So we're talking about $300,000 just for that additional revenue, but we didn't book it on that projection because
I would like to point out, just to keep in mind, that the crane was bond supported. And this proposed building is not. So there isn't a lot of, there's not that ongoing legacy debt being strapped on by potentially doing this. So without passing judgment on people that staffed the port in the past, I would say that this commission and staff are both taking a very careful, pragmatic look at this before jumping into it. So more to come, more thought, but just looking at that and looking how the crane turned out, I would say that this is definitely being well considered.
very different approach. Thanks very much. We have already booked business for the proposed capital budget this year.
Any other marine terminal questions on this go round?
Good job improving all of those numbers, option. He loves praise also.
I'm gonna tell. So, marine terminal, again, this is the, more or less just the graphic breakdown. And we go on to properties. Well, last year's budget had a lot of motion going on in properties. There were sales and things. This year's, really just a stable, properties, situation, operating budget, level. Operating expenses slightly increased, just under 2%, and maintenance expenses flat. We don't have a capital investment plan for them at this time. No project. With the net income before depreciation being 125,000 and coming in after depreciation at negative 65,000.
And Newmarket campus is not on this slide because it's on the airport slide.
It's, yeah, it's, yes, that is correct. Okay. Real estate graphs, just to consistency. And then on to I believe the area that gained some questions as well, with general and admin costs. Now this is the what makes up general and admin, but it's not a comparative slide year over year. Obviously, the largest amount on this is going to be salaries and outside professional service as well. And then you've got broken down with facilities, general and admin back into it, supplies, utilities, and another amount for 25,000. It's 1%. I think we'll end up having to dissect this or look at it at another point just to get it up. the.
Yeah.
And then we've got the allocation. So this is the other side of the coin. What is it? And this is where does it go? And this is the split up again. The smaller portions being real estate and environmental, and real estate shrunk because we had a huge sale of CBC and real estate shrunk as well. We've got a relatively even split then between the marine terminal, Swantown, and the consolidated airport. And then we come to the tax levy slide, which I will admit that I made one error on that transpired through everything. The 2024 levy amount, the very top number, I pulled the 2023 levy amount from my worksheet when I was developing this. So that went up to the 7,857. It was below, it was at 7,778 before. So having that go up, the kick-on effects were mild change to the millage being just below 12 or just below 13 cents. The millage rate for 2024 is 13.09 or 0.1309. And then that had the add-on effect of actually decreasing the annualized increase from $1.14 to 38 cents.
What the impact to the average household is only 38
Positive.
cents. As opposed to the $1.17.
So very minimal, but I did want correction. And then you will see as we carry forward, that small change changes the total tax levy revenues at the top, looking at just over 8 million, where it was just below. I believe the impact is $80,000 total. And then at the very bottom line, that brings us from funds required from either operations or reserves from the hair over $1 million to just hair under, which looks nicer, but it's still only that $80,000. And those are the main changes there, unless there are any other questions.
I'll just state again, I would like the commission to answer the question of whether debt is the way we use the tax levy or whether we're using it from other government services. At some point, I would love for that question to be asked of the commission.
May I ask you a follow-up? Commissioner Harding, we saw that there's a resolution, right, that was shown to us about that. Are you saying you'd like us to possibly refine that
Yes.
resolution?
I would just like the question asked of the commission as to whether we would like to modify that. Or whether there's anything we want to modify around this. We have not had a generative conversation around it. We have talked about it for this whole year and previous years without ever calling the question of like, what do you think? Like to your point, we may completely disagree, but I have no idea where we all stand on any of it because we haven't actually asked ourselves the question. And the question has to be maybe a conversation, but I don't even know what the right question is exactly. Is it changing the resolution? Is it changing this slide when we did the budget? But I would love to. Yes, I am.
Would you like to have that conversation before this?
No, I mean,
adopted?
I think that, but we continue to say, we'll have this the next time, we'll have this the next time, which feels frustrating.
So, we could have a retreat in January, and I know that there are a couple things that some commissioners have talked about wanting to revisit. One of them is the resolution about how we conduct our meetings and sort of the timing of public comment within our meetings. We could also look at some of these financial resolutions, and ask those questions and have those conversations if the commission would like to do that.
That would be great.
And I think one way to drill into the question that I think you're asking is basically when we look at the overview slide, I think it comes down probably to the salaries and benefits buckets and where we're fitting, that currently is including things like response to public records and all of those things. And then they get allocated out across the lines of business. And what I think I'm hearing is you would see them put as a general like cost of government doing business kind of category. And I'm the opposite, but if we then just articulated, what are those general support in GNA, the things that salaries and benefits are covering, the support structure things, and really it comes down to public records and other transparency, maybe some of the litigation, work. We can just have a conversation here and you can ask us, do we see that we should internalize those into the business lines because we're governments doing business, or we should separate it out so that it doesn't look like it's, you know, there's like three things like that you would just ask us and we could have an up and down public conversation.
And one of the pieces of feedback from the public is, why is the tax levy being used to buy a crane, for instance? Like, I think that we can choose how we want to answer that question. So that is exactly what I'm talking about, is I personally think it could be allocated to business line, not to the tax levy, and there's plenty of other things we could be using the tax levy for. But again, we all need to ask that.
And to your point, I think having Tinker as part of the conversation would be important. So you would understand, you know, what the budget is and why we're doing the things we're doing, so you can frame it for.
Yes, communications.
I don't want to weigh into the middle of that, but I will say that from the accounting point of view, we're trying to follow along with that, with having government services and trying to create that category to facilitate that discussion and allow that tracking as it is desired, when that gets settled.
And I did go reread the RCW. I mean, I get that we're limited in what we can use the tax levy for, but it's broader than I thought when I read it. So.
Again, something like useful for purposes.
Right, it's not like the RCW is making us pay for debt.
Onto just the FTE overview. This is really just to break down the positions that we've got with the 3 new positions that we're looking to inquire. The more or less the third of the 0.33 has to do with what was budgeted and fluctuated versus what we're actually going to look for. So we're going to have 55 total budget, which is the 3-person add, necessarily between 2 figures, so to speak.
And it might be interesting just to see the salary implications, because as we are looking at our organizational structure, the operations manager at the airport, is that the right title, Chris? Operations manager. It might not be a senior level position with a certain salary that may have been an organizational change. So 55 FTEs may actually be a decrease in salaries versus, so that might be interesting from a communication perspective as well. So that we have a better understanding. These aren't all senior level positions, I don't think.
Correct. Yeah. For the airport position, think of it like someone you call someone a contract manager. They're not upper level management, they're managing a contract. So it's not, so that in the airport's case, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction as we're talking about being top heavy. I'm just saying that is a piece of feedback that has been communicated to us. As we're looking at our organizational structure, that is relevant. That is an operational thing, not a.
Right.
And we have also raised our minimum salary through this most recent union negotiation. And I think we haven't really talked about that, like how our salary structure is changing. So do you know when it may be ratified and finalized?
Yeah, we were hoping to bring it to you on October 28th, but we're just right now going through and making sure everything tracks what we all talked about and agreed to, and then it needs to go to a vote. That's sort of the wild card. If that can happen before October 28th, we'd bring it to you, but otherwise it would be November.
When you do bring it to us, can you talk a little bit so that we are communicating with the public about the way we did raise our lowest salaries and the justifications or how we got to consensus on that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then we're on to next steps. So again, this is a reiteration of our original next steps early in the slide deck, which is saying the 28th is then the second budget review. We will aim to have many IOUs answered and as many of those in advance as possible. Some other information as well that was requested. We have that draft budget out with the numbers that will also have that fee schedule on there, so you can see that as well. We have then budget and capital investment plan on the 12th, and then possibly we've got that placeholder meeting again for November 18th if necessary, with the final adoption to resolutions that are required to adopt it on the 25th. Any questions over the? Okay. And then, not that we haven't had much, but questions and comments, additional questions about.
What is the second review going to look like? What are we going to be, what are we going to see?
So
Is it another updated version of this, or are we seeing line by line items?
no,
how
it's
do
an
we-
updated version of this, but you're going to have more of that background information upfront in advance, meaning you'll see that draft budget that you're used to seeing, where we would have the budget books and we'd slide pages in and out. So you'll have that version as well. It'll have those appendices with it. That's not in this, that's not something I would put on a slide. But we'll make any changes that we get feedback based on this meeting, and then before that, if there are any that are communicated through as well, we can make those changes.
So I think you've heard, and let me just validate it here, that we're requesting a briefing at this next meeting on the proposed fee schedules and sort of the rationale behind the adjustments and how they came to be what the recommendation is.
And then my question there would be on the next line for the COLA, the 3%, are we going getting an appendix on that?
It'll be those numbers for all the impacts of that will be included with the draft budget as well. So we'll see that. And
I think we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about rationales.
oh,
At least that's what I'm talking about.
okay.
Maybe you're asking for the number.
Well, the rationale for 3%, I mean, it's a 3% straight across the board, every employee is getting a 3% COLA.
I think we're actually still dialing that in. We're looking at what CPI,
Okay.
this was essentially.
Yes, the rationale, but if everyone's different, it's the numbers, I think.
Yeah,
How that's
absolutely.
calculated.
And yeah, and we can talk about, because this would be only for the non-union staff that's left. So we've got 47A and 47B that have their own negotiated.
But then maybe some kind of overview, we have 50 staff, 26 or this, 24 or this applies to these, just. And my question on the capital projects is there were white papers, but I don't know anything about this. There's a building TI. And I don't know where a building TI is or like.
I sent you a
Okay.
response to your email.
Have we already, did we talk about that here? And I just totally missed it.
Where are we?
It was just in the capital projects list, but it's one of the bigger projects and I wanted to understand the improvements. Did I? forget?
I don't know if you forgot it.
Oh, the non-ops.
Do you remember?
That was,
I do.
I forgot. How,
I believe yes, and I believe maybe.
okay,
It's not ready for public consumption.
Yeah. Something that we met about.
but it's in here. So I think.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we're trying to figure out a way to be transparent, but also.
I see, because there was a second, there were two different, okay. I'll follow up.
Well,
Okay.
in interest, and I didn't want to sideline the question, is there something else you wish to see in
Well,
the next presentation?
I'm used to seeing more detail. So I guess that's what I'm looking
Okay.
for, more detail. Generally, we see the spreadsheets with the revenue and line items where the revenue comes from, expenses. like-
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I'm used to seeing too.
Yeah, then that's what we give out in the packet ahead of time. You can go through every single thing, and then you'll see basically every department where you can go through and you'll see
So we're
That,
gonna
exactly.
Have that in advance of October 28th.
Yes.
That'll be part of the package.
I have a few errors, keying errors to correct. But
Yeah, it'll go out in a few days.
I had just one comment too, because we continue to talk, and we've been talking about it for 2 years and 10 months about the airport specifically and the properties and because I think the commission, we've been conditioned to understand that the revenue from the airport is restricted. And it's restricted to stay at the airport. And so we've struggled with understanding where that money is, how is it accounted for? It seems to me it would be fairly easily tracked with a balance sheet for the airport. I don't want to tell you your job, Tad, but it seems like that would be a fairly easy way for us to be able to see what assets the airport owns and the cash and their liabilities. Just a thought.
My guess is it would be easy to start doing now moving forward, so we should be certain we're not missing that. And that our manager, Chris Paulini, could tell us that might be standard practice, but may not have been what was happening here at Port of Olympia looking backwards. Is that correct?
No.
There's an Excel sheet. You're asking about how the money was tracked previously?
Yeah.
So we do have an Excel sheet we're working through that has that data, but with all the turnover in recent years with the port, a lot of hands touched a single document. So Ed and Tricia have a very difficult task ahead of them, working through all of that, backtracking and linking all of that data together, to give us a very confident answer. But yes, moving forward, we now are able to know what we're doing and then fix the historical issues as we move forward.
Tricia, thank you for being here.
Okay. Are we ready to move on? Pat, are you?
With that,
Any other questions, comments?
actually, that's
I want to see the data.
on the question and
I wanna
comments.
see For a budget decision. I was just looking at Sarah and Maggie, Commissioner Tong and Commissioner Sanders, because it's our first time going through a budget. And so I'm trying to think through, like, what is it I'm gonna wanna see, because now's my time to ask, right? Can't say it in 2 weeks.
So
Okay.
what you'll end up seeing, what it'll look like is when I've been doing the quarterly reviews and they were a little bit too detailed for a while. You're going to basically see that detail list by operating units. And next to it, you're going to see what the proposed amounts are for the budget. It won't look like that, but it will be a big, very long.
And that's what we really need to see.
Right.
That's gonna answer a lot of questions, I think, for some of our commissioners.
And we're remiss in trying to get things through
For all of us.
material to you in time for this. That is on me and I do apologize.
Okay.
And one more follow-up, once we see that, I mean, do we have a process? Do we offer amendments to the, like, what happens then? Do we all just vote up and down on the budget? Or how do we get to any refinements that are requested?
Well, I would say that what that more detail will bring is it should make a clearer picture for all of us commissioners to understand even those salaries and the the expenses and it should generate questions that they can either answer and justify, or if we have questions about it and decide that, well, that's wrong for the port, it doesn't align with our vision or our projections, then we can have that discussion and whether or not it's removed or something else is added. But we need that more detail to be confident of what we are approving.
And I think it is a recommendation from the staff to the commission. And this is the stage where we raise questions or concerns that then the commission as a whole can answer. So I can say, nope, I don't think there should be 55 FTE. I think there should be 54. Here's why. You can say, here's why I think there should, and then we can say, commission, what do you think? I think that one thing I've observed is it takes so long to get comfortable with the budgeting process that process has been a little clunky. So I think we can improve that when we have less staff turnover. So it is our opportunity to say, maybe Damien, we should raise rates by 15%, not 5. Let's have I'm
Stop saying this.
Twice.
It's a pure hypothetical.
It's a pure hypothetical. I'm fine saying it. But like, this would be the time when we would have that discussion and then we would have to make a decision because otherwise we are de facto approving 5%.
Right.
So, but I think that's unclear. That was unclear to me when I first started.
So I will say though, that means this next meeting is kind of critical for getting your feedback. So because November 12th is when we have scheduled for the public hearing on the budget, and it's, you know, we want to have your input into the budget before it goes to the public for a hearing.
I do think having the budget book for this stage of meeting next year is better. So having that level of detail now so that then we have the questions, I think having it only at the next meeting is setting us up to be a little behind.
I think so too.
But it is what it is, but.
We do have that one other meeting that's a place where should that, if you want a second look or third look, we've got that option.
Well, why don't we see how, if we got you all the information you're looking for in this section and conversation with you all. Placeholder.
Okay.
We have options.
Yes.
Okay, one final agenda item here is our agenda setting topics. Executive Director Smith. you wanna-
Yeah, I will say, there's one change I would, or suggested addition, I just wanted to vet with the commission, and that is at the November 18th work session. Would love to have a conversation with you all about the master plan and about getting the commission's take or thoughts on an appropriate vision for the master plan, and then also discussing a process by which we have continuous commission involvement in the master planning process. So wanted to set that one up. And other than that, I think this accurately reflects what we've discussed with you in the past. You all have other topics you want to see on here. Happy to entertain those.
I have two. One executive director review. I just reminded myself that it's the end of the year. And that's something that we got woefully behind on before, and out of respect for our executive director. I'm gonna brief one meeting. It's an executive session for review of an employee. So I would hope that we could do something before the end of the year out of respect for
You see it as a December thing, not an annual thing.
by the end of the year, because the commission turns over. It doesn't
Good
this
point.
year, but it will in future years. And so something is better than nothing, in my opinion. We had set up a process we were gonna implement, and with all the turnover, it hasn't happened. So
Could schedule that for the December 9th meeting, have an executive session beforehand.
that would be fine.
And at what distillery will it take? Oh, I'm sorry.
The second topic, I personally, on behalf of myself, wrote a letter to the county commissioners asking some questions about the DNR cuts that they had removed that have an impact on us as a junior taxing district. I had some questions for them. I wanted to let my fellow commissioners know that. And then I also don't need to have any further action on that, but just wanted to make sure if anyone wanted to have a conversation as a whole commission, I'm putting that out there, but I don't need that to happen. I just wanted to flag that as an ongoing thing.
And if the commission is interested in having a conversation around that, I know folks at DNR and can have the right person come and talk about what's going on and.
And I've had people from industry reach out about implications to the private sector as well, that would be very interested in talking to us as far as how this not only impacts public.
If we were going to do that, I would also like to invite someone from the side of the legacy forest protection.
Sure.
Because I do think there's disagreement about them. So.
Yeah.
And I know we have a packed work schedule, so I don't know how much of a priority that is. Would defer to our chair and vice chair on when and if they want to fit that in, unless somebody else has a drastic urge, and you don't have to decide right now, but.
Can we just go back to the exec session? December 9th is a very, very busy day for me. It's not a good day to add an exec session. I don't know if we could go to January 13th, even though in the future we would plan to have it before December. Would people be open to that?
I would prefer to try to get this done, or at least get it started before the end of the year.
That is
Thank-
November
Thank you for
21st.
bringing that up.
November 25th.
That work for you?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that works.
I don't get to vote on whether this happens, I suppose.
I think that you're our sole employee, and if we aren't giving you feedback, it doesn't allow you to do your job, so.
I'm sorry, we've been so reticent.
Noticed.
Okay, anything else for the agenda item?
Well, just that Amy has, Commissioner Harding had discussed today, let's make sure we have the placeholder for this government services versus. line of
Oh, yeah.
business.
I think if we do a retreat, that could definitely, and I like the idea of adding the meeting structure and some of those other topics so that we're gonna have a commission changeover after next year, and the more we can do to set up the new commission for success by having our ducks in a row and doing housekeeping things that.
And like setting up a resolution for the director reviews, things
All
like
that
that.
stuff,
just having
yeah,
that process
yes,
in.
exactly, good idea.
That's good.
Calendar.
And the week of December 9th, later in that week is the Ports Association winter meeting. So to be aware of when scheduling any additional stuff.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna bring up broadband again. BEAD has put out some new grants and released their area map, so if we could just keep that on our radar.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else?
There was a lot of takeaways for me, IOUs and other things to try to schedule. So I'll try to summarize what I heard today and then send it out to you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's a long process.
Thank you all.
All right, hearing nothing else for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned.